Hello, I'm Mr. Polk and welcome to my kitchen. Today I'd like to show you a couple different ways to form ravioli. The first way I'm going to start is by using the ravioli press, and then I'll show you how to do it by hand, because if you're at home you may not have a ravioli press. When using a ravioli press, what you're going to do, I'll move this to the front here, is you're going to start with the press and make sure you put plenty of the flour on it. Otherwise the ravioli is going to stick and you're not going to be having a good time. Don't worry, any flour that goes on here washes off when it cooks. Okay, it doesn't go inside the ravioli. There's certain spots where I don't want to use flour because I don't want it to go inside the ravioli. So this will keep it from sticking. And then you take your ravioli sheet, which after I set this up, I'll show you how to make your ravioli sheet. You lay it over top, and what I like to do is start at the one end, and I gently use my fingers to sort of push the dough into the cavities of the ravioli. Okay? Then you take the press part that makes the cavity of the ravioli. Now, I know you'd want to put flour on here, but if you do that, what happens is you get the flour inside the ravioli. So just press gently and just pick up gently, and if you get lucky like I did right there, they're not going to stick. If it does stick, you just tap them off and they go right back into their shape. But this makes the dimples, if you will, of the ravioli. Now you need a fillet. You can use any kind of filling that you want. The recipe that I have in class is I have a meat recipe and I have a 4 cheese. This one here uses the ricotta, some mascarpone, some mozzarella, and some parmesan. And you just want to, put enough in there to fill up the ravioli. Now you could use a scoop. Okay, you could use spoons, whatever you want to do, but I'm just using a little piping bag. And you're going to fill it up. And then what you need to do is glue them together, so to speak. And to do that, we're going to use some egg wash. So put that back. So the egg wash is just egg and water, 1 tablespoon of water for every egg. And you want to brush everything. It's what I like to call the streets and the alleys. So you want to go down this way and brush, because if you don't brush it with the egg wash, they're not going to stick together and they'll open up. And we'll go down this way, and then we'll start doing the alleys. Okay.
Beep, beep.
And then that's going to run it through. That looks good. Wait for the egg wash. And then you take your other half of the dough, and that's your lid. And you press the lid on. And I start gently from the one end down to the other so that I try to get out any of the air. Okay. Press it down. And then you use your rolling pin to cut it. So you take your rolling pin, and this is doing 2 things. This is sealing them together, and if it starts to stick, feel free to put flour now, because this is the outside of the ravioli. Alright, so we're going to roll it through. And I'm doing 2 things. When you can see the metal, I'm actually cutting the ravioli, and as I'm pressing it, I'm pressing them together so that they stick and don't open up when you cook them. Now, it is important to make the dough, and I'll show you the next step, to make the dough very thin because it's laminated. If you make it thick, you're going to have too thick of a ravioli on the edges. So that looks really nice. So I'm going to peel off the excess, and then I'll turn these out and we'll see how they look. A little plate here. If you were making these, you could turn them out on the sheet trays. Be careful when you pop them out because you don't want to break them. Okay? You can cut them at this point or get them, they can get stuck. But you can see they do have a good bit of flour on. But again, you can shake some of that off, and when they go in the pot, all that goes away. So you could either cook these right away, or you could pop these in the freezer and have them in there, and then when you're ready to make ravioli, you just pull them out of the freezer. So that's how the raviolis go using a press. Let's take a look at how we would actually do these by hand. Now, I'm going to show you how to use the pasta machine. Okay. But you can also do this by hand. So I'm going to take the pasta machine, and I'm going to clamp it. And of course, the handle always falls off. And what's going to happen is I'm going to show you how you set this up. So you're going to take your dough. The dough that we make, we'll make 4 times through the machine. So I already cut it in quarters and used 2 of them. So here's one. And this is an important process because you're not just making it flat, okay? You are actually still doing the kneading process. So what's happening is we're going to take some flour. We're going to put a little bit down on both sides. And we have to roll it out by hand, kind of to make it like a disc. All right? And once you're in a disc, now you can go in the machine. Now you don't want to over flour this because it's going to work the flour into the dough. You want enough flour just so it doesn't stick to the machine, and that's all you need. So you start with your machine at the highest setting where it's the widest. My machine, that's a 7. A lot of machines, that's a 1. In school, that would have been a 1, and some of the newer ones I got, that's a 0. It just all depends. And what you're going to do is put it in, and you're going to run it through the thickest setting. That's the next step. Once you run it through the thickest setting, you always fold it in thirds like a letter, just like that. And then you turn it 90 degrees. If you feel that it has some tack, you can hit it with the flour, but again, don't go crazy. Now we run it through, again, still on that widest setting. Now, if I like to keep it rectangular, so I tug on it, and I fold it in half so it's about the width of the machine. So that's pretty good. I'm going to go back just a little bit. And now I'm going to run it through, again, turn it 90 degrees, and run it through the machine. So now you've got it set up. Okay, it's about as wide as the machine. It looks really neat, and it's ready to go. Now you got to take it through as thin as you want. So you got to go through one step at a time. Here's where you can't really skip a step. You might want to, because it gets, doing the same thing over and over. But each time, the dough is going to get thinner and longer. So I'm going to take it through. This is where if you have 2 people, one person can hold on to the dough, another person can be turning the crank. Again, if you're using a rolling pin, you just kind of roll it out like pie dough or any of the other doughs that we've used in class. So now I'm getting down to the end, and you have to keep an eye on it. As long as it's not making marks, it doesn't really need flour. Okay? So now that it's starting to, it is starting to get a couple marks on there. So I'm just going to get some flour on there, put some on that side. There we go. I'm going to run it through the next one. And you're going to notice it starts to get big. And at this point, I'm going to cut it in half. There we go. All right. So now I got one more time to go through, one last step. So it's tricky because it's starting to get really long, so I'm going to cut it in half. Make sure it's floured up because the thinner it goes, you definitely don't want it getting stuck. And you got to go in order. If you don't, it's going to get stuck in the machine. And the other thing is when I'm done, I always remember to set it to the widest setting. Because if you try to put that big piece in when it's on the low setting, it makes a huge mess. So here's our first piece. That looks good. And then here's our second piece. Turn it. Sometimes you gotta kind of see what edge feels nice. Run it through. There we go. Now I'm gonna get rid of this because it's kind of in the way. And I'm going to show you how to make some homemade ravioli. So let's say you don't have the fancy press, but you still want to make ravioli. You can do it a couple ways. You can take your ravioli like this, and you can put just some dollops down, just like you were doing it on the press. And then take your egg wash and do the same thing. Go through the divisions, the alleys, and then down the street. Carefully fold it over and press it so that you get a lot of the air pockets out. Okay, so here, these can look really nice just by making them by hand. You don't have to have the fancy machine. And just make sure you don't have to like pinch them like a pie dough or anything, but just go through with your fingers and press them. Okay. And then cut them apart. Now I don't have my fancy fluted cutter here. I have that either at school or at work, but you can use just the pizza wheel. If you have the fluted cutter like we use for the pies, for the apple pie, you could use one. Go like that. And then we just cut. And now we have homemade. And they look great. They're going to taste the same. It's just that, it takes, I'll be honest with you, the major advantage of using the press, and I'll put them all on here so you can see the difference. The advantage of the press, really, is it just makes a lot more. Because like when we do this in class, the expectation is the day that we make them. We make them, we would do 4 dozen per group. Now you could also use a circle cutter. Okay, I made square ones here. I could also use a circle cutter as well. The other thing we can do is we can use these presses. And these are for making them by hand as well. So I'm just going to do 2. I'll do one here and do one here, just so I don't run out of dough. Because I want you to kind of see how the press works. And just make sure you brush everything. Now these are designed to make a bigger ravioli, so I think I'm going to put a little more filling in there. And then I'm just going to fold this over. And again, I could have got more out of here. I just wanted to show you. And then press it down like this. Okay. And then these are a cut. They'll cut it and they'll crimp it. So stamp it like a cookie cutter so it doesn't get stuck. And you just go over top and it cuts it right out. Alright, and that makes a nice looking ravioli too. Or you could do the square one. Same thing. Just like that. There you go. So now you see different ways to make homemade ravioli. So I use the pasta machine, but you could roll it by hand using your rolling pin. And you could have, if you have the press, you can get these little guys. You can make them by hand. And like I said, you could also use a round circle cutter if you have one, or like a cookie cutter to make them fancy. Or if you have these little hand presses, maybe you have these at home and don't even realize it. If you do, you could use those. So there you go. There's a lot of different ways to make the ravioli, and next time we'll look at how to cook the ravioli. So thank you for cooking with me today, and I want to cook with you again right here at Mr. Polk's Kitchen.